what did it for me, what pulled me into hip hop. And you know, I've never had an opportunity to say this or make the discrepancy. I started out listening to rap music like many people did. Rap music. Run DMC, the Fat Boys, Houdini and such. They started out making hip hop albums, their first albums. And then they started making, they started making hip hop albums and they started making rap albums. By their second and third album, they were making rap albums. My older brother, Robert, would get these tapes from this guy he used to ride around with. And I'll never forget this tape, and this is a funny story. He wrote on the tape, "Rock 'em along." And I said, wow. I said, because this, you know, first of all, it's corny, and this is my brother who's hip hopped out Pumas, the shell toes, the lumberjack jackets and hats. And I said, what is this? He caught me in his room one day and he said, that's my Rock 'em Along tape. So I popped it in, but it was one person on there. So I said, who the heck is Rock 'em Along? My brother had mistakenly thought that Rock 'em Allah was Rock 'em Along. So what I did, this is where Roger's research started. I went to House of Guitars, and there was no internet then. There was no go over to the computer or scan a record or anything. They used to have, just like in Recordtown, this gigantic book. And it was song titles and artists from page to page. And I mean, this thing was like 8 phone books. And I found the name of the song that was Check Out My Melody by Rock 'em Allah. So I go home and I knew arguing with my brother was going to be futile. I took my little TDK tape and I dubbed his Rock 'em Along tape and I put Rock 'em Allah on my tape. But beyond all that, you asked me what got me started. When I heard Rakim's voice, when I heard his lyrical agility, there was nothing in hip hop like it. It was flawless. There was no way this dude could make a mistake. It was just, I said, I gotta get more of this. So he had Check Out My Melody. He had Paid in Full. He had I Ain't No Joke was out. And what I did was I got my little money together. I got my little job. I was working at Wendy's. And I put my first down payment on hip hop. Paid in Full tape, Crush Groove soundtrack, and the Fat Boys first tape. Those were my first 3 purchases. Now, if you listen to what I just said, all hip hop projects. All hip hop projects. There was no way I was not going to start my foundation off without those 3 projects. I can't explain to you what it did to me. I just can't. When Common said I used to love her, he made a reference to hip hop as a female. That's what that did for me. I started dating hip hop at this point. This was my girlfriend.
It ain't got no sense of direction. You see what you see when you wanna be.
And I had Right On magazines. Shout out to Cynthia Horner, was the editor of Right On magazine, and Word Up magazines. There was no Source magazine. I went to the back of both of those magazines and I sent the order forms in so I could keep getting the issues in to my home, mail order. And what I want to say is very important about Kate Ferguson. The earliest issue of that magazine I have is from 1986. This is the blueprint of the Source, the rap pages, Vibe, Ego Trip magazine. All these hip hop magazines came out in the 90s. This sister, she had the ratings page for top albums. She had a rating system which was a bunch of records breaking. Instead of 5 mics, which the Source adopted, it became popular. She had a Spin Masters section, which was for the popular DJs at the time. And something real, very few people know this. She broke a lot of these artists, Tribe Called Quest, Master Ace, Marley Marl, Big Daddy Kane. There was no video shows then. Okay, we didn't get Yo MTV Raps until 1988. Okay, there was no Rap City. None of this stuff. And what this sister did, and this was really brutal of him to do this, she did a feature on Tribe Called Quest, and then the Source got their first publication around 1990. They dissed her magazine and said, you know, it's so dope to be in your magazine. They were talking to the editors of the Source magazine. So instead of this other magazine, we gave an interview from that just wants to know what cereal we ate for breakfast. And the sister very eloquently pointed out in her opening page of her magazine, shout out to Tribe Called Quest for the success of Low End Theory, but we promoted your Instinctive Paths and Travels, your debut album, when no one knew who you were and no one cared. We did not deserve the disrespect. And her letters page was loaded up with disses for Tribe Called Quest. They hit Tribe Called Quest so hard, they actually forced the Source editor to sit with her in a meeting. And the two of them held each other's magazines up with her hand around Q-Tip's neck with an apology letter in his hand. I have that issue at home. Yeah, but my point is that here was something, once again, we created. And these two young white kids at college came up with the Source, which started out as a letter page and later on a magazine. Stole from her. Stole from us. Yeah. See, and see what happens if we don't properly document hip-hop. This is what happens. The next man comes in and the world thinks, well, they came up with it. Which brings me to my point. It became so important to me to know exactly the wheres and whys of hip hop. I'm one of those liner note readers. You know what a liner note reader is? One of the people who opens a cassette or album up, reads the credits. Who edited? Who mastered the album? What studio was it recorded in? Who's the guest vocal that's not really listed? They don't say their names in the song, but you see in the background. And more importantly, I started memorizing names. So wait a minute, this is Biz's album. Why does it say Antonio Hardy? That's Big Daddy Kane's name. Oh, ghostwriting. That's what ghostwriting means. I started filling in the blanks. I became the man actually in high school. And before Recordtown, before radio or anything, and I became the man because one of the most important events happened in hip hop that changed the landscape of the game forever. DJ Scott LaRock was murdered. He was killed outside of the projects in the Bronx, defending D Nice. D Nice called him because a group of men wanted to jump him over a girl. And Scott got there, he squashed the beef, and he hopped in a Jeep in the backseat with D Nice and D Nice's boy, and someone fired from the roof, and one of the bullets hit him in the shoulder, but the one that killed him hit him behind his ear. Now, before I put in important facts that very few people know about that, one thing happened here in Rochester. The Rochester grapevine is horrible. Whatever happened at that moment, if you don't write it down and record it, it's going to sound way different when the 10th person hears it. What was going around high school, Franklin High School, my alma mater, was Dougie Fresh had shot Scott LaRock at his party for acting up. Then it was Run and Jay shot him because the KRS-One tried to storm the stage at one of their shows. I had to find out what happened. Shout out to Kate Ferguson. She did a nice write-up on Scott LaRock. It was an illustrated picture of Scott, young entrepreneur murdered outside of the Bronx. And she detailed everything I just told you with him helping D Nice. And I came back to school that following week. I sat at my lunch table, started talking, and when I looked up, it seemed like the whole lunchroom was standing around the table. That's when I realized I had something. From that day on, when something happened, let's go holler at Raj. Raj will clear this up. That's what happened, and I became the man. And that was at Franklin. And from there on, it was just like, Raj, I had that book bag over my shoulder. Guys, I bet you got a bunch of rap magazines in there. I'm in there, I'm reading, I'm trying to find out what's going on. And I don't know if Chris says the same thing. Chris G, straight from the underground. I don't know if he thinks the same thing. Look at the little bit of magic we gave our own family and friends here in Rochester. Look what we did in a short period of time, man. It seemed like it was forever. But, I always thought Chris was going to take off. After I read that Hits magazine, I said, they're going to snatch you up, man. And I'll never forget Chris telling me, I can't do it. They need me here in the Rock. And I said, Chris, you could take your mission abroad. I said, you could be the man. And he was just like, I have a battle here. Me and Chris both read comic books. But Chris, I believe, was more like, he was more in the scheme of the original hero formula. Chris was the dude, like, I'll never forget. There was a debate of some kind going on in the air. So Chris calls me and says, I'm going to plug you in. I need Raj to settle this. Chris, instead of just plugging me in and say, well, we got Raj from Recordtown. No, Chris goes, yes! Now we can settle this. It can be told. Here's the man in the myth. You all know him. He works in records. I'm like, Chris, just plug me in. And just plug me in. No, Chris is like, you waited. Now the time is oh God. 3 times Chris tries to plug me in. At this point, the discussion has mushroomed into something else. I said, Chris, why didn't you just plug me in? Oh, but Chris, like I said, Chris was very dramatic. He was very colorful on the show, man. And I would do those. Listen, that's the other thing. I would do those impersonations for Chris. Chris would die. I would do those impersonations of Chris live on the air because Chris would call me angry if I said, well, I'm going out on a date. Chris, well, like, you always got time for these shorties and your skins and all these skins. Remember skins? And I'm just like, Chris, I said, look, man, I wasn't planning to do this. Make something up. Just die. And I'd sit to the side and I would write something down. I would put something, but I'm going to tell you something. I never said this. I never just threw anything at Chris. One night, Chris wanted me to do a State of the Hip Hop review. State of the Union, he called it, for hip hop. And I said something, it came to me on the spot. Evie Ev gave me my props that night, and I swear it could have been Rakim himself telling me, yo, that was dope. I said, there's the line in Ain't No Half Steppin' where Kane talks about he want to open up a school for MCing for those who want to be in his field in court. But then again, on second thought, to have so many MCs coming out sounded so similar, it's too confusing for you to remember the originator. And that was the end of my State of the Union. I remember Ev going, yo, man, that's kind of dope because that's what's happening in the game right now. Too many cats. When Ev said that, I was the man. And then Chris was like, see, when you apply yourself, this is what I said, Chris. Well, you just signed me off. And this, of course, he logs me off the airways. And he's like, I shouldn't have to ride you this hard, Roger, to get you to do what I asked you to do, all right? So next week, have something dope. And then, he logs off. But yeah, I'm going to tell you something. Chris showed me something under pressure, what I was able to do under pressure. I took one verse of Big Daddy Kane's song and stretched it out to an entire State of the Union review. And I was on the air for about 30, 40 minutes. And you know what got me? Wasn't even Chris. I got off the air. My phone is ringing. People going, yo, that was dope. And I wrote it in an hour. I said, he said throw something together. And me and the girl we left. We went out to the movies. But she sat there chilling. Long enough for me to do this. And it just to have those people calling up, leaving messages like, yo, man, that was fire, man. I like that. That wasn't my plan. He said throw something together, and I just ran with that. But Chris, if you want to really give him props for something, Chris had a colorful bunch. He knew how to select people, which goes back to the A&R thing. You want an A&R, there was your A&R. He picked up, well, he ran with Ev for years. Ev was his boy for years. Me, Rhythm X, DJ Stone, sister, not Sister Soldier, but her name was, I call her my sister, but her name was Soldier. She was real colorful, was up there. You had an array of talent up there. We all had different personalities. He knew how to get people together. And when I first met Chris, this is not the same dude who I tuned in the other night. Like, he looks nothing like he sounds. He walked in the store, he had a Master Ace Slaughterhouse t-shirt on. And I said, when he talked, I said, Chris G? And he's like, yes, you've heard of my legend. And he extended his hand. We laughed, talked about some stuff, and he said, I need you on the show. I need you on the show. And I said, wait, on your radio show? And he was like, he wanted me to come on, and we talked about the first big controversy was going on that summer was Roxanne Shantae's Big Mama. She went at all the female MCs, annihilated them. It was a joint that Granddaddy IU Ghost wrote for her. But the version Chris was playing, Large Professor did the beat for it. Everybody else had the Granddaddy IU version, which was boring. Large Professor looped the James Brown song called Lick and Stick and gave it this doo-doo, 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 doo-doo. Chris had that version, white label. And he was killing it. And we talked about it. He talked to me about it in the store, and I went on the air. The phone was... The next day, the store was packed. People wanted to come in and see the dude they heard on the air. That's because of Chris. What Chris did was he actually put the icing on an already tasty cupcake. He really did. And then after that, he was just like, yo, he said, let's do it every week. He said, let's do it every week. Talk about everything.